Hey, welcome back to my channel. I appreciate you being here today. I'm Erica, and this is a place where I mostly talk about books. You have come into my April wrap-up, where I'm going to talk about all the books that I read this April. I'm also going to be talking about a year-long project that I'm working on that I'm pretty excited about. It's the first time I've participated in something like this, so we will talk about that, and I'll update you on where I am in that project as well. And then I've got a couple of books in mind that I'm going to read for May, and I'll mention those too. First up on the agenda, I think it'll be easiest if I talk about my year-long project, which I can't really say it's my year-long project. I definitely did not come up with this. I'm simply participating in someone else's year-long project. So if you are unfamiliar with the fantasy sub on Reddit, there is in fact a fantasy sub on Reddit, and it's about fantasy books, as the name implies. And each year they do a bingo where the entire year you're tasked with reading books that fit the prompts on a bingo card, and there's no prizes, just a sense of satisfaction at the end and getting through some books that hopefully each person enjoyed. I will link to the post on Reddit for the 2023 bingo on the fantasy sub, so you can see for yourself if you want to participate. It just started April 1st, so there's plenty of time still to get through the books. And I'm going to put up the bingo card that they so helpfully created. You can see there's all different kinds of prompts here. I'm going to pull it up because through the magic of editing, you can see it like here, but I can't see it. So I'm going to look on my phone and we'll take a look together. You can see that there are 25 squares here, which makes sense because it's bingo, right? And so each square has a different reading prompt. And if you go on to the actual post in the fantasy sub, you can see a further explanation of the rules for guidance for each prompt. I'll go through a couple just so we can see an idea in case you might be interested in participating. Some of the prompt guidelines for each square that we've got. Let's pick one out of the top row. We will go with the first square, which is title with a title. The additional prompt explanation for this one is read a book in which the novel title contains a job title, military title, or title of nobility, such as locksmith, lieutenant, or lord. This title can be something that is bestowed upon a character, such as hero, and it can include fictional titles that are only in the setting, such as Legendborn by Tracy Dion. And then for each prompt, they do have the option for hard mode, which is an additional restriction put on getting the bingo square. So the hard mode for this one is not a title of royalty. So like king or lord or anything like that would be out. Let's take a look at the second row. Angels and demons. We'll take a look at that one. Story must feature angels or demons or both in a prominent role. The hard mode for that is the protagonist is an angel or a demon. The third row, we'll take a look at the multiverse and alternate realities. Read a book in which the setting contains at least two universes, dimensions, planes, realities, etc. that characters within the book can travel between. Multiple worlds in the same physical plane of existence, such as planets within a universe, would not count for this square. And the hard mode is characters do not walk through a literal door in order to get to another world. Okay. The fourth row across, we will look at elemental magic. Read a book that has elemental magic. The primary magic within the world deals with the classical elements: earth, wind/air, water, and fire. Hard mode, not V.E. Schwab's Shades of Magic series or Jim Butcher's Codex Alera series. Finally, the last row, we will look at coastal or island setting. The story features a major setting that is near or surrounded by the sea. Hard mode, the book also features seafaring. So you can see they put the additional guidance rules around each one. And also, since this is in the fantasy sub, it goes without saying, or I guess it doesn't because they do specifically mention it in the post. post. But each book that you read has to be a science fiction or fantasy book. It can't be, you know, other genres, but science fiction fantasy includes like horror, speculative fantasy, anything that's fantasy element would count as part of reading the book for these prompts. So I am going to be participating in this. I do have my plan. I created kind of my own little version of the bingo form with some ideas for most of the boxes. There's, I think, maybe 3 or 4 boxes that I haven't been able to come up with a title yet. We're gonna see how things go. Maybe something I will come across it to be able to fit into a couple of these prompts. We'll see. But I think I've got like 22 of the squares already planned for what I could read for these prompts. I just thought it would be really fun. It would be a good way to branch out maybe to some different books and to move through my TBR as well. My priority is always gonna be with books that I have that I physically own on my TBR. That's generally my goal, rather than going to books that I don't already own, like borrowing from the library, because I don't want to own a bunch of books that I haven't read. So that's typically my priority when looking for something new. I just thought that would be something fun to do for this year. If you want to join, like I said, check out the link. I will put it into the description for you so you can look at the post on Reddit in the fantasy sub and get all the information for yourself. See if it might be something fun for you to take a look at. And I'll be providing updates for my bingo card each month when I do these wrap-ups as well, just to see how far along I get, see how many bingos I get. Yeah, maybe I'll get a full card. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. And a much more short-term goal that I have for myself, every month I'm doing some themed reading. It's not all of the books that I read in a month, but I'm choosing like 3 books to read each month as part of a theme. So the one that I just wrapped up was giving a second chance to authors where I didn't love the first book of theirs that I read. So I will link that video that I did dedicated to that, and I will also be including those books in the wrap-up that I'm about to get into. But also for next month's theme, I'm going to be doing a themed read of authors where I haven't read any of their books before, with the little sub requirement asterisk that it can't be a book that is a series. It has to be a standalone book from an author where I haven't read anything they've written before. I think I do have those 3 books planned, not 100% though, but my thought so far is gonna be these books, I think. So I've got Noir by Christopher Moore. I recently got all of these. Janny Wirtz, To Ride Hell's Chasm, and Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. Tentatively, these I think are going to be my themed read for the month of May. We'll see if that changes, but this is my current plan for the May themed read. And with that, let's get into the books that I read in April. We will chat a little bit about each one. What I'll be doing is going from books that I liked the least to books that I liked the best. So we'll go by star rating. I do start off with the DNF books, of which I have 1 from this month. I will put all of the lovely little book titles up here. So the first one, the only DNF that I had this month, was 56 Days. This is by Catherine Ryan Howard. I know I had mentioned in my mid-month update that I was debating if I should DNF this right now. I did ultimately decide to DNF it because I was not in the mood to read a story that had to do with lockdown from the pandemic. Like, it's too soon. I couldn't do it. I was too distracted by by my memories of that, like the start of the Rona. So like, I need some distance from the whole thing before I can get into this. So I did end up DNFing it. I do plan to pick it up again at some point because it does sound like an interesting, like, mystery suspense thriller situation. Right now, I'm just not in a place to want to read books or watch shows or movies that are based during, like specifically being based during the pandemic, having that be like a key plot point. I'm just not interested in that right now. So this is just going to be a temporary DNF until the point in time where I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess I'm willing to to delve back in to that setting. I don't have any 1-star books, and I should say I think it's probably rare that I have a 1-star book, because if I dislike a book that badly, I will generally DNF it. Like, I think it's super rare that I would finish a book that I hate so much that I would give it 1 star, because I don't know, I feel like that's a waste, like a complete waste of my time. There's so many books that I want to read, and there's so many good books out there. Like, I don't like the idea of continuing to read a book that like I'm hating. So I don't have any 1-star reads, and it's probably always going to be rare that I would have a 1-star read. I will probably have DNFs, I will probably have 2 stars. Super rare that I would have a 1-star, and I have no 1-star this month, so let's get to the 2-star. I only have 1 2-star book this month, and that was House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. I did read this as part of my April challenge, which was to give a second chance to authors where I previously read a book from them, but I didn't love it. So I had previously read The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. That was her debut novel. I really didn't love that, and so but I saw potential. I saw potential in her ability to come up with an interesting story, so I decided to read her other book, which is, of course, House of Hunger. In a lot of ways, I thought that this was a step down from The Year of the Witching. I felt like the plot was barely there in House of Hunger. It both felt like nothing was happening, but also everything was rushed. It's very strange because those are kind of opposing ideas, but it felt like nothing was happening, and then all of a sudden we're at the climax with like no logical buildup. I didn't end up caring about any of the characters, except there was a cat in this one that I cared about. But everybody else I'm like, meh. Meh, don't care. So I disliked this one even more, because I gave The Year of the Witching like 3 stars. This one is definitely 2 stars. Maybe even like 1.5, to be honest, but I don't do half star ratings, so I'll give it a 2. The writing, I will say, it felt a lot better to me in this one than in The Year of the Witching. It felt like a lot more smooth. To me, it was a lot more readable, so I appreciated that. And that's, I think, why I ended up giving it 2 stars, mainly because like the actual like prose, the flow itself was so much better in this one than I felt that it was in The Year of the Witching. I just found it super boring and predictable, so I don't know who this is for, because I feel like the horror aspect was extremely lacking. It wasn't a good vampire story. I would argue there's like no vampires in this one, despite the implications of like the cover and the premise. I don't know that I would even classify what's going on as vampirism. Maybe, I don't know, that's debatable. We'll leave that up for debate. I guess I just don't even know who this is for. I guess if you just want like an extremely surface level, superficial read, you know what? Because I have a friend who loves beach reads, and she says specifically it's because they're pretty generic, and you just go through and you forget them like 2 hours after you finish them, but like they're entertaining in the moment. If that appeals to you, and I know there's millions of people that are into that, that might be who this book is for, kind of like a light horror version of a beach read. If you are comfortable with not really needing to be invested in anything that's going on or any characters or anything, that might be who this is for, but that is not me. So unfortunately, I did not love this book. To my 3-star books, the first one that I have is, of course, The Metamorphosis. This is by Franz Kafka. This is just a little novella, little guy. It was 50 pages long. I read this as part of my classic series that I'm doing. I'm going to try to do it every month, where I read a classic story and give my thoughts on it, because I have not read nearly enough classic literature, so I'm hoping that this is going to encourage me to keep doing it. This was a weird book, y'all, okay? I thought that it was really well written, and I thought it was a super weird and interesting premise. The reason that I gave it 3 stars was 2 reasons, actually. So our main character wakes up one day and finds that he has turned into a beetle, and that's what a giant beetle, as you can see. That's where this story picks up. And I found the entire story incredibly depressing. You just watch the main character and his family become more and more and more unhappy, and everything is very grim and kind of hopeless. I don't like books like that. I don't mind when there's challenges in books, you know, characters that have to face adversity and different things like that. But when I felt like the entire point of this book was just to be extremely depressing, I don't personally enjoy that in a book. So I took a star off for that. Also took a star off because you never find out why the main character turns into a beetle, and that kind of a loose thread bugs me. And so even though, I mean, you don't need to know why he turned into a beetle to read the story. You don't. Like, it's not critical to the plot or anything. It never comes up, actually. But for me, for who I am, the kind of person that I am, I need to know. Okay? I need to know if I'm gonna read a book of a human turning into a beetle one day. I need an explanation for why. I just do. It's who I am. It might be a flaw. Maybe other people don't care why he's a beetle, but I need to know for myself. So if you're looking for a really weird classic novel, if you don't mind depressing books, this was, I think, a really interesting look at some human nature. Ironically, I know, because main character is a beetle, but I think it does explore some interesting ideas as far as human nature goes. So I mean, it's only 50 pages. You can read it and not like invest a bunch of time, even if you don't like it. I do think it's worth a read. It's super short and it is weird, so that's all I got. I will link the video below if you want to watch my more fully fleshed thoughts. Also, I did, in that video, I read through some of the more amusing Goodreads reviews on this, just some like little snippets, amusing snippets, and let's say there is a wide variety of opinion on this book. And of course, I read Throne of Glass. I'm continuing my read of the series. This is the first full-length, like, actual novel in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I ended up rating this one 3 stars for a couple of reasons. Once again, the writing in this was like all over the place. So if you're unfamiliar with this story, which frankly, I was unfamiliar with it before I started reading the series. All I knew was, I see this author everywhere. What's the deal? So the series follows an assassin, Selena, and we see her go through discovering like her heritage and going on jobs. I don't want to spoil anything because I've realized, you know, now, as far as I am into the series now, I realize it's a lot more complex than just like an assassin walks into a bar or whatever. It's a lot more complex than just following an assassin. There's a pretty in-depth world that the author has built for all of this to take place in. There's a lot of magic that at least has the potential to exist in this world. It seems like alternate dimensions going on in here, which, by the way, maybe I can include one of these in my bingo, because the alternate dimension one, right? Maybe I will see what happens, I guess, through the rest of the series, if in fact there is like an alternate universe. Anyway, I don't want to give too much away in just this review here, because I try to do spoiler free for these kinds, like a wrap up video in case you haven't read it. So while she is an assassin, that's definitely not the limitation of where this story is. This first one I definitely had mixed feelings on, because just like the novellas, which I read previously, the writing in this was all over the place as far as how good I thought it was. A lot of the writing in here I thought was bad. A lot of it I thought was cringy, but then it would kind of switch and it would be good. Like, I feel like halfway through this book, it switched to being better writing. So I don't know what is going on with with this author or what, but I feel like the actual writing style slash quality slash whatever is kind of unpredictable. But I know that this is an early book of hers, so I'm hoping that that's changing. This one though, I took off a star for the actual, what I felt was writing quality. I did not think the quality was very good. I also didn't like that there's kind of a Hunger Games plotline kind of like jammed in here. And I know that this was written at the time where Hunger Games was like a big deal, so I get why an author would have been inspired at the time to like take that concept and put it into their own work. But it just didn't fit with how the premise in here, it didn't fit. The concept didn't fit. It didn't make any sense in the way that it was set up. It completely took me out of the story's immersion to have the whole Hunger Games plotline just kind of like, that's me jamming jamming a plot line into a book. That was my gesture for that. It didn't work. It didn't work and it distracted me, and I found what was going on in the story outside of that Hunger Games plotline to be a lot more interesting, a lot more compelling than that very strange, out of place Hunger Games situation. So I did get through it. I did rate it 3 stars, and I will talk about Crown of Midnight 2 very shortly here because I read these both at the same time. If you missed it, I did do a reading vlog for both this one and Crown of Midnight, so I will link that below in case you want to see more in-depth thoughts. That is a spoiler video, so I do talk about spoilers in case you want to avoid spoilers. You probably shouldn't watch it, but if you don't care or if you've already read it, by all means check it out. See if you share some of my feelings about The Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nghi. This is the second book in the Singing Hills series. I believe it's the Singing Hills series. And I read this as part of my Giving Authors a Second Chance video that I did, which again, link below. So this series follows a cleric as they travel through like a fictionalized version of, I believe it's ancient China. And so this cleric is traveling like through the hillside to get different stories of the locals and like folklore. They're documenting it, it sounds like, for their order, because their order keeps histories. And so we follow this cleric as they go through the hillside and collect the folklore. This one I enjoyed a lot more than the first one. This one definitely kept me engaged the whole time. We see our cleric ends up kind of trapped in the snowy mountainside by some tigers, 3 tigers. But in this universe, tigers have the ability to speak. They have the ability to change into human form. So our main character cleric ends up having an extended conversation with the tigers, because the tigers obviously want to eat the cleric, right? Because like they're tigers. So the cleric prefers not to get eaten, so in an effort to kind of like delay what's happening, the cleric decides to tell the tigers a story about, it's a story that involves a tiger. It's tied to tiger lore specifically, and the tigers want to set the record straight because they feel that there are lies or misrepresentations in the story that the cleric has to tell. So you see both what is happening with the cleric being kind of held hostage by these tigers that want to eat them, but you also see the dual story of learning the tiger mythology story part of it too. So you kind of see two dual stories going on. And I thought that it was great. I was very interested the whole time. Unlike the first one, I didn't think it was slow. I thought it was consistently really interesting. And I like books that explore fictional mythology, like mythology that the author themselves has come up with for the world that they're building. I really like that kind of thing. So I have been enjoying this, and I do plan to read the additional books. Crown of Midnight, the second full book in the Throne of Glass series, but if we're counting the novellas, it's the third book. Let's not debate that though. So this Crown of Midnight, and this continues to follow Celaena's adventures, how things are unfolding for her. She is the assassin for the kingdom, so we see her being sent on different jobs by the king. Things don't necessarily go as planned, because that's kind of what this author likes to do. And I found this one to be a lot better than Throne of Glass. It feels like, as far as the writing quality, I felt like it was a lot more consistent in this one. And I also feel like the author leaned a lot more into her original ideas for world building. I didn't see any more weird, like, shoehorned in concepts like the Hunger Games thing in Throne of Glass. I didn't see anything like that in this one. This felt like the things that happen in here made sense. I will say I find this author, no. I find this main character a lot of times to be incredibly frustrating because she's really emotionally volatile. And I think the more that I read, the more that I've thought about this, I think maybe that's the intent. I will have to read more of the series to see where it goes. I have some ideas as to why that's possibly intentional on the part of Sarah J. Maas. I don't know for sure, but I think that getting further in the story is going to give me a better idea if the author wants me to be really frustrated with the main character Celaena or not. I am enjoying this series. Again, I do plan to continue. I bought the whole series, so I'm reading through the whole thing. No matter what, I'm reading through it and we'll see. But I am cautiously optimistic because, like I said, this one is a lot better than the Throne of Glass. And also, I don't want to give away spoilers, like I said, because this is an ongoing series. Just check out my vlog that I did, my reading vlog for this book. It's in the description box. You can see if you want to see more in-depth discussion of what goes on in this book, my thoughts on what goes on in this book. I will link that below. I tentatively think if you like YA fantasy, you will probably like the Throne of Glass series, at least from what I've read so far. I reserve my rights to change my mind on that. And to the 4-star books. I read my first T. Kingfisher book this month, and that was Nettle Bone. This I ended up really enjoying. This definitely turned fairy tale concept on its head, because normally we see the princess trying to, find her prince, right? In this one, the princess is trying to kill a prince. So a little different. There's some really amusing part. I don't know. I felt amusement. I feel like amusement is a good word to describe how I felt. We follow the Princess Mara. She is the third daughter in a kingdom, and her two older sisters, they both end up getting married to the same prince guy. Her oldest sister marries him first. She dies. So then her next oldest sister ends up getting married to that prince. Our main character, Mara, she gets sent to a convent because nobody wants her to give birth to any heirs that might supersede her sister's children. So Mara is content from the time she's a teenager until she's in like her 30s to just be in this convent, right? Minding her own business, working on her embroidery and whatever. And then she realizes that this prince is not a nice dude and really wants to help her sister get out of the situation. So she decides to try to take this prince out. And most of this book, almost this entire book, is her going on a quest to find out how to actually get her sister safe and take this prince out. This ended up being really fun, really amusing. Like I said, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's very subtle humor for a lot of it, but even the way the characters were written, like the main characters that we follow, the people that she gathers to help her on this quest that she has, they are very likable in their own way. I can't really think of another book that I have read that's like this. I just really appreciate when things subvert expectations, or they completely take something that you would expect and turn it around. And that's what this one did. It was like a dark fairy tale and I really enjoyed it. I think I'm really glad that I read it as the intro to Kingfisher. I don't know if this is representative of the rest of her work. But I do plan to read more. I have another one from her in my possession that I'm going to try to read soon because of how much I enjoyed this. It was one that I ended up reading so quickly. It was so readable. And if you like dark fairy tales, you would probably like this one. And I am very excited to read more from T. Kingfisher. And of course, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. This is by Heather Fawcett. It is, every time I look at it, it's so beautiful, right? I really, really enjoyed this book. I kind of made it a mission this month. While I was sick, I read just like cozy fantasy books. So this was one of the cozy fantasy books. I did make a video of that, and I will link that below as well if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts. But this book follows our main character, Emily Wilde, who is in fact creating an Encyclopedia of Fairies, if you could not tell by the name of this book. So we follow her. She is a professor at Oxford in the UK. Cambridge in the UK. And she is trying to get information on fairies. In this universe, fairies exist. Everyone knows fairies exist. It's like a generally accepted thing. So she has decided to go to a remote, like Nordic country, and she wants to study the fairies there because they haven't been studied before. It would be like a groundbreaking part of her encyclopedia that she's putting together if she can get information on the local fairies there. So we follow her as she shows up to this remote village and immediately gets into the bad graces of the locals. She offends them all. She's very like socially awkward, and she has kind of a one-track mind just on her work, so she's not really concerned about making friends with the locals. Not too far into her trip, one of her colleagues shows up. I have to say, I love Bamblebee. As I've sat on this book now for like a couple of weeks thinking about it, I love Bamblebee even more, her colleague. He's just such the perfect balance to our main character, Emily. He's laid back. He loves being comfortable. He loves good food. He loves to have other people do work for him. He's one that takes the path of least resistance in like every aspect of his life, and he's absolutely the opposite of our main character, who comes across much more type A. And so it was really nice seeing their dynamic. There's a lot of funny ways to play that off of each other in this book, which this author did do. You watch our main characters I suppose Bamblebee is one of the main characters too. You watch them try to get information on the local fairies. You watch them interacting with the local fairies. There is a lot of exploration of fairy mythology, which I thought was fun. If you are looking for a fairy heavy book, this is fairy heavy, not very heavy. This is not very heavy at all, but it is fairy heavy. This is gonna be it. Their fairies play a huge role in this book, not just as a concept, but as characters themselves. So I think that this was a unique book in that respect. Fairies are not always nice, and they can be very mischievous. They can be kind of evil, and this explores the different fairies that our characters come into contact with. I understand that this is the first book in what's going to be a series. I think the next book is supposed to be out next year. I definitely plan to continue the series. This was definitely cozy fantasy vibes. It also kind of felt like dark, like fairy tale vibes too. It was a unique atmosphere, but I enjoyed it. I enjoy reading this, and I definitely look forward to the next book in the series. And we are in the home stretch now for 5-star books. I had 3 5-star books this month. The first one that I had is My Heart is a Chainsaw. This is by Stephen Graham Jones. This was also one that I read as part of giving authors a second chance. I initially read The Only Good Indians by this author, and I didn't really care for it. I thought it was kind of boring, and I didn't think the horror in that was horror-y enough for me. So I didn't love it, but I felt like I could see the potential to like one of his books if I tried something else. I am so glad that I did. Reading My Heart is a Chainsaw, this was so good. I can't explain enough how well developed the main character was in this one. I thought it was so easy to understand her thought process, the decisions that she would make. Her backstory was clear, well developed, really gave an explanation for why she is the way that she is, so that even when she's doing when she's doing things and making decisions that like you don't necessarily agree with, it's understandable why she's doing it. I really also loved the slasher horror aspect of this. Like, the author leans super hard into it. So if you are a fan of like slasher horror films, this is going to be like, concepts in this book are going to be completely what you're already familiar with. I used to be huge into slasher horror. I don't really watch a lot of slasher horror anymore. I mean, I've got some favorites that I'll go to every now and then, you know, like the Scream movies or Nightmare on Elm Street, but I don't really seek out slasher horror anymore. Now I like different types of horror. But slasher horror holds a special place in my heart for the movies that I liked when I was younger, because I did do a lot of slasher horror. So this was so much fun. You can tell the author is extremely comfortable with the subject, because like, it's completely woven through the whole story, to the point where a lot of it is meta, which I always love. I love meta concepts in stories, by the way. I really want more meta in books. I want more authors to feel comfortable with that, because like in this book, not only is our main character obsessed with slasher horror, but she's like living in a slasher horror. So very meta situation going on in this book, which I can never get enough of a meta concept. It's what, I don't know, it probably, is that a millennial thing maybe? We're like obsessed with meta? Maybe. But I just loved it. I will absolutely read the next books in this series. I know it's supposed to be a trilogy, I believe. The third book is not out, but the second one is. I believe it's Don't Fear the Reaper, and it takes place, I think, a couple of years after this one ends. Definitely gonna read that. I plan to buy both of these because I really liked this book so much. I do plan to reread it. Probably when the third book comes out, I'll do like a reread of the of the trilogy, like reread the first 2 books to prepare for the 3rd book. Definitely, I'm so glad that I gave this author another chance though, because it was a page turner. I did not want to put this down. I stayed up to read it. Like, this was so good. And it was everything that I wanted in a horror book. And it's so rare that I open up a horror book and have it deliver to me exactly what I want. And that is what happened in this book. So really excited that I read this one. And if you like horror, if you like slasher horror, I would recommend that you read this one too. Here we go. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Of course, this is a 5-star book. This is one that I read, a cozy fantasy, while I was sick. And let me tell you, this was the coziest of the cozy fantasies. This was just, it was such a sweet book, and it was relaxing, it was comforting. When they say low stakes, absolutely true. The stakes in this book are not high, but that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a book where I could feel like, you know what, everything's probably gonna be fine. That's what I want sometimes, you know? Like, I want some stuff to happen, but I want to kind of feel like everything's gonna be fine no matter like what happens. And that's what I felt like reading this. I loved the fantasy elements. I loved that our main character was a female orc. I feel like we never focus on female orcs. When I see orcs, I feel like they're always men, or male, I guess, because orcs are not men, but you know what I'm saying. I loved that Viv is the orc, and she is the female orc, and she has just decided she has had enough of adventuring and questing and battling and all those things that one does when one is existing in kind of like a D&D fantasy realm. She's decided she's had enough of that. She's gonna open up a coffee shop. She doesn't really know anything about running a business, and she hasn't had coffee very many times herself, but she is determined. This was, I mean, it was just such a sweet story to watch unfold. Watch her build her business, watch her become friends with the locals, find people who want to see her succeed, who want to be her friend. This was so cute. I loved it so much. I know that this was his first novel as well, which is awesome. I think he did so well for writing this book as his first novel. I know he's got a second one coming out, I believe in a few months, maybe late this summer, I think. Absolutely, I'm gonna be buying that one and reading it, like, completely. I will read anything that this author puts out. Especially if it's cozy fantasy. I really loved how readable this was. It was a relaxing read. It wasn't like, look, I was very sick when I read it, and I didn't have to like put a ton of effort into this. This author was just like, you just relax and let me do all the work in entertaining you. And I was like, thank you, Travis Baldree, because that's exactly what he delivered. If you want a cozy fantasy, I think you're going to be really, really happy with Legends and Lattes. And of course, my last 5-star book, which should not be a shock, The Hobbit. The ultimate cozy fantasy, probably, right? Although, I don't know. This is like the pinnacle, I think, of like cozy fantasy, but I feel like Legends and Lattes is cozier than this, because there's definitely higher stakes in this than there is in Legends and Lattes. But this is the beautiful illustrated edition of The Hobbit, of course by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I love this story. I won't go into it because, I mean, I feel like everybody knows what The Hobbit is about at this point, right? I really love the adventure aspect of this story, of just a little hobbit going outside the bounds of what his community normally does. I mean, his community doesn't go on adventures. They don't do epic quests. They really don't even like to leave their small towns, right, that they're in, their little neighborhood communities. They don't really like to do that. And this guy, you know, Bilbo decides one day he's going on an adventure, And I just love it. There's no part of this book that I don't like. Every single time that I read it, it just makes me happy. It makes me happy to read it. I think if you have not read anything of Middle Earth, I think it's a really good place to start, because it's pretty lighthearted as far as fantasy goes, and you can read it as a standalone adventure. You know, you don't have to commit to like reading the full Lord of the Rings trilogy with this if you don't want to. This completely stands on its own, in my opinion. It's just fun. It's a fun story. What more can I say about The Hobbit? This has always been a 5-star book for me, and so I decided to reread it because I just got Lego put out some new Lord of the Rings sets, so I got in the mood. I read The Hobbit. I built some of those sets. I'm gonna be watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy and building the Rivendell Lego set. So, I mean, they're my favorite movies. I love this book. I've always loved this book. So, strongly recommend. If you haven't actually read The Hobbit, maybe you've only seen the movies, maybe you haven't seen anything, and I think this is worth a read. If you like fantasy, worthwhile, right? I mean, founding father of what we consider fantasy, Mr. Tolkien. You really can't go wrong with The Hobbit, I think. That is all that I have for the books that I read in April, but I do have a couple of books that I'm planning for May for sure. One of them, of course, Brandon Sanderson. I'm going to be diving into the Cosmere. This is way overdue for me. I decided to start with Mistborn. What I did was I went on to one of the Brandon Sanderson subs on Reddit. I'm pretty sure it's in the Cosmere sub. They have a couple of suggested reading orders to get through all of the books, and so I chose one. I know quite a few people suggest not starting with Mistborn, but the reading order that's on that sub makes sense to me, so I am going to be starting with Mistborn. If you're interested in that reading order, I'll try to pull that up and link it below if you also want to get started on reading through Brandon Sanderson. So this I will be having a dedicated video to in the month of May for sure. And then I am also going to be continuing with Throne of Glass. So these are the next 2 books in the series. We have Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows. Just like I've done for the other books, I will be doing a reading vlog on these for sure. I'm going to keep doing that, I think, each month until I get through the series. So we will see. I'm cautiously optimistic that these are going to continue to improve, and there is a lot of potential in this world that Sarah J. Maas has built. I'm interested to see where she goes with it. There's a lot of magic potential, a lot of like alternate universe potential that could be played with, I think. So, and you know, just some good old-fashioned assassin stuff too. So we'll see how it goes. You can look out for that little vlog that I do coming up shortly again as well. And before I completely wrap up, let's do a little assessment to see the books that I read this month that actually fit into the bingo card that I talked about at the beginning of the video. So this is the bingo card. We'll see. I will mark them off as we go along through, you know, the months until this is filled up, I guess. I will mark off the ones that I have been able to meet. The first square that I was able to mark off was published in 2023. I used this for the Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. This was definitely a fantasy book, so it counts, and it was definitely published this year, so it counts. And I was also able to fill in the book club or read-along book square. This one you actually would need to go into the fantasy sub, and they have a link to it, but they have different book clubs, so you have to choose a book from their list, or the book that you read has to be part of their list. It could be a book that they've read in the past as part of a past book club. It doesn't have to be a current selection. My Legends and Lattes, which is fantasy, and it was part of their book club picks, I believe, in December of 2022. So that counts as well. I'm already 2 down on this bingo card, so I'm feeling pretty good about those things. And I'll do another update at the end of next month. We'll see if I was able to cross any more squares off. That is all that I have for this month's update. Let me know your thoughts on any of the books that I talked about today. I would love to hear if you agree, if you disagree. Again, it's always okay to disagree. The world would be extremely boring if we all liked and disliked the same things. Also, let me know if you decide to check out the Reddit Fantasy Sub Bingo. I would love to know if anyone else is playing. Or if you already were, let me know how far you are on your bingo card already, because I mean, we're only a month into it. So, you know, like I said, if you're new to it, don't feel like you are too far behind. There's still 11 months to go. The end date is March 31st of 2024. So there's still plenty of time to get a bingo on that card. But yes, thank you so much for stopping by today. I always appreciate it. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.